Tonight we are not here to search for miracles, because miracles are not absent from your life. They have never been delayed, denied, or withheld. What appears to be missing is not divine action, but human recognition. The activity of God does not arrive on demand, nor does it respond to fear, urgency, or pleading. It is already present, unfolding quietly, perfectly, and without interruption. The reason so many feel separated from miracles is simple: they are looking outward for what can only be recognized inwardly. Most people believe that miracles happen when something changes in the outer world. They wait for conditions to improve, for health to return, for circumstances to shift, for people to behave differently. Yet spiritual law does not operate through visible struggle. It moves through awareness. When the mind is filled with personal planning, mental arguments, and constant effort, there is no room left for the gentle activity of truth to be perceived. The human mind, busy trying to fix life, unknowingly blocks the very grace it seeks. Miracles are not missing from human experience, but they are widely misunderstood because most people define them through material outcomes rather than spiritual awareness. A miracle is often imagined as a sudden external change that defies logic, arrives unexpectedly, and fixes a visible problem. This expectation causes disappointment because it places attention entirely on appearances, conditions, and timing. When the outer world does not shift as hoped, the conclusion is that the miracle never came. In reality, the misunderstanding lies in assuming that miracles originate outside of consciousness instead of within it. Spiritual truth does not function as an emergency response system reacting to human needs. It is a constant, orderly presence that operates regardless of personal belief or emotional state. Because it does not announce itself with noise or drama, it is frequently overlooked. People search for dramatic signs while ignoring subtle inner shifts such as peace replacing fear, clarity dissolving confusion, or trust emerging where anxiety once ruled. These inner changes are the foundation of all outward transformation, yet they are dismissed because they do not match the expected definition of a miracle. Another reason miracles seem absent is the belief that they must violate natural order. This belief turns miracles into rare exceptions instead of natural expressions of harmony. When life is viewed through this lens, divine activity appears selective and unpredictable. In truth, harmony is the natural state of being, and discord is the distortion created by limited perception. When perception changes, harmony reveals itself without force. The miracle is not the change itself, but the recognition that harmony was always present beneath the appearance of disorder. Human reasoning also contributes to misunderstanding by trying to control how good should appear. The mind forms specific outcomes and then watches anxiously for them to manifest. When reality does not conform to these expectations, it feels as though something has failed. This mental interference prevents recognition of deeper adjustments already taking place. Guidance may be unfolding in a different direction, dissolving a false desire rather than fulfilling it, restoring balance instead of satisfying impatience. Miracles are often quiet because truth does not compete with fear for attention. Fear demands urgency, reassurance, and visible proof. Truth requires receptivity. When the mind is crowded with constant analysis, worry, and planning, awareness becomes dull to spiritual movement. The miracle is still present, but perception is blocked. As awareness softens, understanding deepens, and what once seemed absent begins to feel unmistakably real. Misunderstanding miracles also means assuming they belong to special moments or advanced individuals. This creates distance between ordinary life and spiritual reality. In truth, every moment contains the potential for revelation when consciousness is open. A shift in perception, a release of resistance, or a sudden sense of peace is not insignificant. These are the signs that understanding is replacing misconception, allowing what was always present to be quietly recognized. Human effort often blocks spiritual awareness because it is usually driven by fear, urgency, and the belief that life must be controlled to be safe. From an early age, people are taught that progress comes through striving, fixing, and constant mental activity. While effort has its place in practical tasks, it becomes an obstacle when applied to spiritual realization. The attempt to force understanding or manipulate outcomes creates inner noise that drowns out subtle awareness. Spiritual truth does not respond to pressure, and when the mind is tense, it becomes unreceptive to deeper perception. Most effort in the inner life takes the form of mental struggle. The mind analyzes problems repeatedly, searching for solutions, rehearsing outcomes, and measuring progress. This constant movement gives the illusion of control but actually reinforces separation. Awareness becomes focused on the problem rather than the presence of harmony beneath it. In trying to reach peace, the mind unknowingly confirms its absence. Spiritual awareness arises not from reaching outward but from relaxing inward, where truth is already established. Another way effort blocks awareness is through personal will. When individuals believe they must make something happen, they place themselves at the center of the process. This strengthens the sense of a separate self acting upon life. Spiritual awareness, however, reveals life acting through the individual, not being directed by them. As long as personal will dominates, attention remains fixed on doing rather than allowing. The more one tries to bring about change, the less room there is for spontaneous insight to appear. Effort also expresses itself as self-improvement and spiritual achievement. Many approach inner growth as a ladder to climb, believing that discipline, techniques, or intensity will earn greater awareness. This approach turns spirituality into another form of accomplishment and comparison. Instead of dissolving the ego, it refines it. Awareness becomes something to possess rather than a state of being. In this mindset, moments of grace are missed because they do not align with effort-based expectations. Fear is the hidden engine behind most effort. The fear of lack, failure, illness, or uncertainty pushes the mind to stay busy. Stillness feels unsafe because it removes the familiar sense of control. Yet it is in stillness that awareness naturally opens. When effort ceases, fear loses its fuel. The mind settles and perception widens. What was previously obscured by activity becomes gently apparent. Letting go of effort does not mean passivity or neglect of responsibility. It means releasing the inner strain that insists on managing outcomes. Actions can still occur, but they arise from clarity rather than anxiety. In this state, awareness is no longer blocked by mental tension. Life is experienced as intelligent and supportive, not adversarial. When effort relaxes, spiritual awareness is no longer something to reach for. It reveals itself as what has always been present, waiting for the noise of striving to quiet enough to be noticed. Stillness is the doorway to divine activity, because it is the state in which human interference subsides and deeper awareness can emerge. In ordinary consciousness, the mind is constantly occupied with thoughts, judgments, memories, and expectations. This mental movement creates the impression that life is something happening to us or something we must manage. In such a state, attention is fragmented and reactive. Stillness does not mean the absence of thought, but the absence of attachment to thought. When the mind is no longer chasing every idea, a quiet space opens where awareness becomes whole. Divine activity is not something added to life. It is the underlying intelligence that sustains and orders it. This activity does not shout for attention or force itself into awareness. It expresses itself through intuition, harmony, and inner knowing. When the mind is noisy, these subtle movements are overlooked. Stillness allows perception to shift from surface appearances to deeper reality. In that shift, life is no longer seen as chaotic or uncertain, but as guided and purposeful. Many people resist stillness because it feels unproductive or uncomfortable. The mind equates value with motion and control. In stillness, the familiar sense of personal direction weakens, and this can feel like loss. Yet what is actually lost is the illusion of separation. In the absence of mental effort, awareness naturally aligns with a greater order. This alignment is not created, it is revealed. The individual does not direct divine activity, but becomes receptive to it. In stillness, Fear begins to dissolve because fear requires constant mental reinforcement. Without repetitive thoughts, fear has nothing to sustain it. As fear quiets, clarity takes its place. Decisions arise without strain, insight appears without analysis. Problems that once seemed complex lose their urgency. This is not because circumstances have immediately changed, but because perception has shifted from resistance to acceptance. Divine activity becomes noticeable not through dramatic events, but through a sense of rightness and flow. Stillness also restores trust. When the mind stops interfering, there is a natural recognition that life is not hostile or random. This recognition does not come from reasoning, but from experience. In quiet awareness, one senses being supported rather than tested. This trust allows action to emerge naturally, guided by inner conviction rather than external pressure. Actions taken from stillness are often more effective because they are aligned rather than forced. The doorway of stillness is always available, but it is often ignored in favor of effort and distraction. Entering it requires nothing but willingness to pause and listen. There is no technique to master or discipline to maintain. The moment attention rests without demand, the doorway opens. In that openness, divine activity is no longer something hoped for in the future. It is recognized as the living presence already unfolding within and around every moment. Truth is revealed through inner silence because silence removes the distortions created by constant mental interpretation. The mind habitually filters every experience through past beliefs, fears, and expectations. This filtering does not reveal reality as it is, but as it has been conditioned to appear. Inner silence is not the suppression of thought, but the suspension of judgment. When interpretation pauses, awareness is no longer shaped by memory or anticipation, allowing truth to emerge without obstruction. Most people seek truth through information, discussion, and reasoning. While these have value, they operate on the level of concepts rather than direct knowing. Truth is not an idea to be understood intellectually, it is an experience to be recognized. Inner silence shifts attention from thinking about life to being present with life. In that presence, understanding arises naturally, without effort or explanation. What becomes known feels certain, not because it has been proven, but because it resonates deeply and quietly. Inner silence exposes the difference between belief and reality. Beliefs are maintained through repetition and mental agreement. When the mind grows quiet, beliefs lose their momentum. Some dissolve instantly, others gently loosen. In their place comes a sense of clarity that does not argue or defend itself. This clarity is not emotional or dramatic. It is simple and steady, carrying a feeling of rightness that does not depend on external validation. Silence also reveals truth by dissolving false urgency. The mind creates pressure by projecting imagined futures or replaying unresolved pasts. These projections feel real and demanding, but they exist only in thought. Inner silence brings attention back to the present moment where fear has no substance. In this present awareness, truth is not something that must be achieved or protected. It simply is. When urgency fades, perception sharpens, and what is essential becomes obvious. Through inner silence, a deeper intelligence becomes perceptible. This intelligence does not communicate through words or instructions, but through insight and intuitive recognition. It guides without commanding and corrects without criticism. When the mind is quiet, this guidance feels natural rather than supernatural. It does not overwhelm the individual, but gently aligns them with what is appropriate and timely. Inner silence also restores balance between the personal and the universal. The sense of being a separate self struggling against life begins to soften. In silence, awareness expands beyond personal identity and connects with something larger and more stable. This connection is not mystical or abstract. It is felt as peace, coherence, and inner assurance. From this state, truth is not sought as an answer to a problem, but recognized as the foundation of experience itself. The revelation of truth through inner silence is always immediate. It does not depend on preparation, moral perfection, or spiritual achievement. The moment mental noise subsides, truth stands revealed, not as new knowledge, but as what has been quietly present all along, waiting for attention to rest instead of strive. Letting go allows grace to appear because grace does not operate through control, resistance, or personal struggle. Grace is the effortless movement of harmony, and it becomes visible only when the mind stops insisting on its own way. Most people hold tightly to expectations, identities, and outcomes, believing that security depends on maintaining them. This clinging creates tension and narrows perception. When there is tension, awareness becomes fixed on what might be lost or gained, leaving little space for something new to be revealed. Letting go begins internally, not with external circumstances. It is the release of the belief that life must conform to personal plans in order to be good. This belief keeps the mind in a constant state of correction, measuring each moment against imagined ideals. Grace cannot appear in such a state because attention is always directed toward what is wrong or incomplete. When expectations loosen, awareness shifts from judgment to openness. In that openness, grace becomes perceptible as ease, guidance, and quiet support. Fear often disguises itself as attachment. The fear of loss, failure, or uncertainty encourages the mind to hold on more tightly. Letting go feels risky because it seems to remove protection. In reality, it removes interference. When fear-driven attachment relaxes, the mind settles and perception widens. Grace is not something that arrives from outside to rescue a situation. It is the recognition that life is already sustaining and correcting itself without force. Grace appears in subtle ways that are easily overlooked when the mind is busy controlling outcomes. It may show up as a sudden shift in understanding, a peaceful acceptance of what once felt threatening, or an unexpected redirection that resolves conflict without struggle. These movements do not announce themselves dramatically. They feel natural and timely, as if they were always meant to happen. Letting go allows these movements to surface because it removes resistance to their expression. The act of letting go also softens the sense of personal identity. When individuals stop defining themselves by roles, achievements, or struggles, a deeper sense of being emerges. This deeper sense does not need to prove or defend itself. From this place, grace is experienced not as an occasional intervention, but as a continuous presence. Life feels less like a battle to be managed and more like a flow to be trusted. Letting go does not mean indifference or withdrawal from life. It means releasing the inner demand that everything must happen according to personal preference. Actions still occur, decisions are still made, but they arise from clarity rather than tension. In this state, grace expresses itself through appropriate action, quiet confidence, and inner stability. When letting go becomes natural, grace is no longer something hoped for in moments of crisis. It is recognized as the underlying support of every moment. What once felt fragile begins to feel guided. What once felt uncertain begins to feel held. Grace appears not because something has been achieved, but because something unnecessary has been released. Awareness replaces struggle with harmony because struggle is created by resistance. While awareness dissolves resistance through understanding, struggle arises when the mind argues with what is, labeling experiences as wrong, unfair, or threatening. This mental opposition consumes energy and narrows perception, making life feel heavy and conflicted. Awareness does not fight circumstances or attempt to reshape them through force. It observes without judgment, and in that observation, tension naturally begins to ease. When awareness is present, attention shifts from reaction to recognition. Instead of immediately responding with fear or control, there is space to see what is actually happening. This space changes everything. What once seemed overwhelming becomes manageable, and what seemed fixed begins to soften. Awareness brings clarity, and clarity reveals options that struggle could never see. Harmony does not come from fixing life, but from understanding it at a deeper level. Struggle thrives on identification with thought. The mind creates stories about past mistakes and future dangers, and these stories are treated as reality. Awareness interrupts this pattern by returning attention to the present moment. In the present, many imagined threats lose their power. Awareness does not deny challenges, but it removes the emotional weight added by interpretation. Without this weight, situations can be met with balance rather than panic. As awareness deepens, the sense of a separate self battling against life begins to dissolve. There is a recognition that life is not an enemy to be conquered, but a process unfolding with intelligence. This recognition brings a feeling of alignment rather than opposition. Actions arise naturally, guided by insight instead of fear. When actions are aligned, they require less effort and produce more coherent results. Harmony is often mistaken for the absence of difficulty, but awareness reveals harmony even in the presence of challenge. Harmony is the inner state that allows challenges to be met without inner conflict. In awareness, difficulties become experiences rather than personal threats. This shift reduces suffering, not by changing events immediately, but by changing the relationship to them. Awareness also restores trust. When struggle dominates, life feels unpredictable and hostile. Through awareness, patterns become visible, and there is a growing sense that experiences serve a purpose beyond immediate comfort. This trust does not come from blind belief, but from repeated recognition that clarity follows presence. Over time, confidence grows, not in controlling life, but in being able to meet it. As awareness replaces struggle, harmony becomes the natural state. This harmony is not created through effort or discipline. It emerges when resistance fades. Life begins to feel supportive rather than confrontational. Decisions feel clearer, emotions settle more quickly, and responses become appropriate rather than reactive. Awareness does not eliminate movement or change, but it removes inner friction. In that absence of friction, harmony is revealed as the underlying rhythm of experience itself. The message of this entire speech is a gentle reminder that nothing essential is missing from your life. What appears as absence, delay, or struggle is not the lack of miracles, grace, or harmony, but a momentary loss of awareness. Miracles are not rare events reserved for special circumstances. They are the natural expression of life when resistance falls away. Human effort, driven by fear and control, often obscures what is already present, while stillness and inner silence restore clear perception. When striving quiets, truth reveals itself without force. Letting go opens the way for grace to move freely, not as an intervention, but as the underlying order of life itself. Awareness replaces struggle not by changing the world through effort, but by transforming how the world is experienced. In this transformation, harmony becomes visible where conflict once seemed permanent. The invitation is simple yet profound. Stop searching outward for what can only be recognized inwardly. In stillness, silence, and awareness, life unfolds with intelligence and care. When you no longer try to make miracles happen, you begin to notice that they were never absent. They were waiting for recognition, quietly present, ready to be revealed the moment you allow understanding to take the place of effort.